Hey guys, GHAZZY TV here with another Path of Exile 2 video, and in this one we're going to talk about the Frost Mages as I finally got around to playtest them. For those of you who don't know, we're currently running an uncapped subathon, and I had to play a melee character up to 90. Still got 2 more levels than that. However, I finally got my time to put into the Frost Mages, and I will say 2 things. 1, I've been judging the Frost Mages a little too soon. What I'm trying to say is I was wrong, but I was also right. So let's go through the details of this, because the topic at hand is basically Frost Mages versus Storm Mages. I labeled the Frost Mages as a little lower tier than the Arsonists, and after playtesting them, I will say that I have to move the Frost Mages up to an S tier. However, there's a couple of details to go through, and also tackle the question at hand: is Storm Mages outperforming Frost Mages or vice versa? Path of Exile is a numbers game, and always have been. We have in PoE 1 Path of Building. It's a tool that we use to be able to verify numbers in a very, very effective way and also accurate. So I ran the numbers on the Frost Mages versus the Storm Mages, and essentially I came to the conclusion that if you play the Doriani Storm Mage in a defensive setting versus a Frost Mage build in a defensive setting, the Storm Mage would without a doubt win every single time in terms of damage output. It just does not. There's no way in the entire game that mathematically Storm Mages will do less damage. Then if you compare an offensive squishy styled version of the Storm Mage versus a squishy style, or rather squishier style version of the Frost Mages, yet again the Storm Mage will do more damage. It's not a lot more damage, I'll give you that, but they will deal more damage. This is what led me to basically make the statement that Storm Mages are the ones that are outperforming. Now, I will say this. They are better at clearing. It feels way more smooth to clear with the Storm Mages. I will also say that both builds, no matter what kind of theme or style you're playing with, are both able to do literally anything the game has to offer. The hardest content in the entire game can be done on both builds at reasonable budgets. You don't have to worry. You can choose to play either or. However, I was consistently looking at and comparing them with Storm Mages and Frost Mages in a defensive versus a defensive style, and offensive versus an offensive style. And I think that was a mistake that I made, because the thing is, if you do an offensive focused Doriani's prototype Storm Mage setup, you become very squishy, and that build already has the downside of needing to not stand in lightning explosions. And that was why I said several times, you want to push up the defensive oriented focus on it, and that felt better than that of the Frost Mage. However, the Frost Mage build can play in an offensive setting without that harming the defenses that build is promoting as much as the Doriani. It actually comes down to a little less sustainable EHP, but you have a much higher actual HP pool in terms of energy shield, because you don't have to sacrifice your chest piece. You can run a proper one. And there's a bunch of different items which I'll tackle in this video as well. There will be a paste bin down in the link to the descriptions below for this build. So basically my verdict has been that you can't compare, or rather I can't, which is my mistake. I was comparing defensive versus defensive and offensive versus offensive, when in reality the gist of this is that the only real comparison is to compare Frost Mages in an offensive setting versus Doriani in a defensive setting for the most comfortable approaches. And in that scenario, Frost Mages will deal more damage, and they have the freeze with a slightly worse sustain of the EHP, but higher defense layers in general, but also higher single target damage, even though the clear is a tiny bit slower than the Storm Mage. That is my take on this. As a result of this, I'm going to have to label the Frost Mage to be up in an S tier. My next project will be a Skeletal Snipers. We'll tackle that, but that is the gist and answer of the question at hand. Is Storm Mages going to be better or not versus Frost Mages? It is fair to say, though, that both of these builds will outperform the Arsonist, and these builds will vastly outperform melee builds because of the current state of the game. So I'm going to talk about a few things here before we tackle the entire build guide of this character, and I will also run an audience with the king that is the King of the Mist boss, and I have it maxed out to the tits here. It's like literally the hardest version that you can get, which I've shown in previous builds as well. That said, I will mention that there's a couple of things you can do, and I know people keep telling me when I talk about clearing that, oh shit, GHAZZY, you should just weapon swap. Here's the thing. I played with Blink, and once you played for 15 minutes with Blink, you will never want to play without this. You can make this something that you only use on your second weapon swap, and if you do, it actually is favorable to run it with a Crest of Ardura, which allows you to have reduced cooldown during the time you actually blink. So you'd be able to blink and then weapon swap back to resummon your minions. That is, in my opinion, the best way to run blink, because then you save those the spirit reservation from this to make you able to have more minions. That is a very effective way to do that. However, both that strategy and just generically weapon swapping is a very effective way to play the game. However, myself and many other players, no matter what kind of settings in the graphics I change, no matter what kind of stuff I'm trying to fix to make this not be a problem, every now and then, sometimes more often than not, I crash the entire instance because of weapon swapping. And when I say crash the entire instance, I mean I get kicked out the login screen, and when I log back in, my map is gone. As a result of that, I don't want to risk whatever the shit this is costing right now. That's 7 divines. I'm not going to risk 7 divines because I needed to weapon swap. So I'm just straight up not weapon swapping because of that. That is the reason I don't do it, and it is very, very frustrating. So that's why you don't see me doing this when I'm playing. Sometimes I do, but every time I do, I risk crashing, and it's fucking terrible. So that's one thing I wanted to point out. I'm going to talk about the skill tree, the gems, and the gearing a bit as well. A little shout outs to both Riparian and Helmbreaker. Some pieces of this has been inspired and based off the discussions I've had with both of these players. And in the descriptions below, you'll find a paste pin to my version of this. Let's talk about the charm slot first. I'm going to run a freeze immunity charm. The act, I went for the draft, the poisons or venoms. I went for mana regen and then chaos resistance. Skill tree wise, we're doing the doggo and we're doing the altered flesh into the spirit reservation, life reservation, and the energy shield reservation. Skill tree wise, basically pathing straight up here through the damage. Make sure you pick up Living Dead, some extra energy shield, also insightfulness and melding. Get the the revive faster here and the damage. And then instead of pathing out here in the middle for 2 points, we're taking the top route here so we can get another jewel slot, which is very important for this build. And then on the left-hand side, we get the crit nodes, another jewel, energy shield into the revive faster, as well as AoE, which actually helps the collateral splash the minions, minion resistance. Head straight up, some more crit nodes, minion resistance, big intelligence node, energy shield, more energy shield and max resistances, obviously restoration reduction for minions, all the way down to pick up the entire wheel for minion life, as well as damage output and resistances. And then we have this node for Ancient Aegis over here, as well as White Berry for a little bit of block and the Core of the Guardian. And I will say this, I'm currently oiling Deadly Swarm. I'm not sure this is the optimal way to do it, but it feels pretty good so far. The other option, in my opinion, would be Flashy Deflections. And this is to help the block chance, which has now been brought down to 49% instead of the cap that we've run in the past. However, jewels is something I want to talk about before we move on to gear and our skill gems. And the reason for this is because Frost Mages don't really feel that good until you have some proper crit with them. And the way we achieve this is through a different variety of settings. First off, we can look at these type of jewels. It's a 2 modifier. I can look at this one here. There's a 2 modifier jewel, which essentially is minion have critical strike chance and minion have critical strike bonus. I think that those are very important. So a couple of those is very needed to make Frost Mages feel good. And if you can get yourself a Time Lost Sapphire, they are a pain in the ass to search for, by the way. I'll try to show you how I do this. Basically, you want to have a large. A medium would be fine, but if you have a medium radius, these 2 nodes will go away, and you'll pick up these 2 just to get that extra notable. Modifier you want is cast speed as well as crit strike damage. If you can get a third one, it would have to be like minion damage. And if you have a small one, it doesn't really matter. It's basically supposed to hit as many of these nodes as possible, and we place that jewel in this position. So that's the kind of like the gist of it. And if you compare that to like Storm Mages are in a position where you need to have Doriani's prototype, and in my opinion, preferably 1 Ventress Gamble, and to make sure the lightning resistance is low. And I think that about the price range that you can be able to play a Storm Mage is about the same as you can do for a Frost Mage. Now, I think it's very preferential since both builds are able to do all the content. I played Storm Mages a lot myself in a defensive setting, and I'm now playing the Frost Mage in an offensive setting. And I will say that objectively speaking, I might even go ahead and say that I feel like Storm Mages actually do perform better in the higher budget states. I think in the lower budget state, they are very equal, if not the Storm Mage being better because of how easy it is to get the damage ramped up. But Storm Mage will take off as soon as you get a bunch of jewels, and it's not too expensive, at least not at the time of this recording. But before we move forward, I'm going to show you how to search for one of these time-lost sapphires. So the way you search for this is extremely annoying, right? Freaking frustrating because you can't search for these modifiers as of now. So you search for Time Lost Sapphire, and then what you do is you search for medium, upgrade radius to medium, and I believe you set the values to 2. Yes, and that's how you search for a large. And I believe if you do 1, it'll show medium, right? Yeah, there we go. So what you can do is you can have 1 up to 2 if you want to search for those depending on the prices. If you want to look for 2, you'd have to do this. And now you'll see that the prices is about 5x and it's 1 divine. Literally scroll down and click load more. You'll do this till you have 100 items shown in the window, which is the highest you can go for. That's it. Control F, Minion. Okay, let's see. Resistance, there's one with attack speed. You want crit and then attack speed in that order. Rest, chaos, attack speed, critical strike, damage bonus. This is 1 divine for this. Intelligence corrupt is not too shabby. Skills have critical strike chance. This is actually not too bad for what we're going to do. I'm going to show you why in a bit. So basically, this is how you search for it. And if you can't find it in this list, as you move down the list, you can't find any. It's chaos, rest, crit. Basically, I'm looking for a jewel that has 2 modifiers that I want. And basically, if you can't find it, the solution now would be to go up here and say, well, I'll search for divine orbs at this point and say, well, the minimum price is 2 then. And again, do this. Now I've upped the minimum price of the search, and now I'll have 100 new ones that I haven't seen before. And again, search for minions and see if I can find anything here that has, well, here's damage and rest. That's not what we want. So this is how I basically search for it. Accuracy we don't need, rest we don't need. Damage, res, damage, crits. This one is actually pretty decent. So that's basically how you search for it, and it is a pain in the fucking ass to search for. But that's how you do it. So why am I saying crit is so important? Well, let's go through the skills first. We have Skeletal Warriors. Basically, we're going to chuck in some debuffing or utility options in here. I'm not sure if this is optimal at the moment. What I'm running is more attack speed, martial tempo. I have Blind, which reduces enemies' accuracy, and then Ruthless for more stun build-up. You can use things like Maim, Culling Strike, and stuff like that as well. And then we are running Summon Infernal Hellhound, which I have the actual Maim in. Again, more debuffing in here. I'm running Fiery Death, since this guy is always going to be igniting enemies. Magnified Effect for larger AoE, and Culling Strike and Wildfire is kind of whatever. I just chucked it in here. I'm sure we can find other ways to apply some debuffers with this, but this is what I'm running right now. Blink, I'm running with Second Wind and Ingenuity, and since I don't want a weapon swap, I will always run Blink, which is going to cost me some damage output. That's a preferential decision. I think it's the best way to do that. Skeletal Cleric, I'm running Last Gasp and Elemental Army. Pain Offering, I have Persistence for the duration. I have Inspiration for the reduced mana cost. Expanse for the radius of it. And then Font of Blood for some extra regeneration when we have this active. Grim Feast doesn't need any support. It's just broken. Hypothermia is the curse we're going to be using with Heightened Curse, Focused Curse, as well as Hex Bloom to make it pop faster and have a better effect. And then Hex Bloom is really nice for rituals and breach mechanic. It just spreads the curse. You don't have to cast it several times over. Then I have 1 Skeletal Storm Mage. You can run 2 if you feel like you need it for the shock application of this. This is what we refer to as a shock bot. We're running that with Conduction for more chance to shock. We're running it with Overcharge to increase the efficiency of this shock to be a 35%er. We have Stormfire, so once it does shock, it will be permanently active because of our friendly neighborhood Infernal Hellhound. And then we have Minion Mastery for levels and Coursing Current. I just chucked in at the end of this. You don't need to 6-link this. I literally took this 21 gem from my previous character. You basically will be more than fine running with 3 sockets. You don't need Minion Mastery or Coursing Current. Eye of Winter is why crit chance is so important. As you might have noticed, we're not running Frostbomb, and that is because we don't need to. And the reason for that is the Frostbomb's purpose is to apply cold exposure. But it was very frustrating to cast Frostbomb every 8 seconds to maintain the cold exposure, at the same time as I'm casting Eye of Winter to apply the critical strike weakness. This is why we're using this, so that our base scepter can be a rattling one, so we sacrifice melee minions instead of Malisara, which ramps up pretty slow as well. As a result, we're casting Eye of Winter to apply crit weakness to make enemies take more crit strikes. And we are going to support this with Unleash, Acceleration, Cold Exposure, and Strip Away. And if you, for some reason, 6-link this or put a 5-socket on this, you'll put Mobility in there, most likely. So that's kind of the setup we're doing. And this allows us to inflict Cold Exposure on critical hit. My current tooltip is telling me that I have a critical strike chance of 13.8%. And as you can see here, we're hitting a lot of times per second on single targets. So if you just cast this a couple of times, you're going to have this up immediately on a boss without needing to cast Frostbomb. And since you're already going to be casting this ability to make enemies crit weak, we're just combining those two 1-to-1. And also it applies crit weakness. So the more times you hit an enemy, the higher the chance of you actually critting, which then will apply the cold exposure. So very comfortable. Last but not least, we have the Skeletal Frost Mages, which in my opinion are lost some quality. They reduced reservation, so I corrupted it and lost them, so I do need a better one in here. We are going to support these with Scatter Shot, Arcane Tempo, Feeding Frenzy, Cold Mastery. And the last one for clearing is Wild Shards. Now, I find Wild Shards to be not so good in most cases. But when you enter a position where Wild Shards is useful, it is insanely good. Tight corridor maps where your minions are surrounded, obliterates them. Rituals, a joke. Early stage when you pop a breach, a joke. It's incredible how good it is in those situations. And since this build is offensively designed, we're going to be able to do so much damage that you're fine with having those moments where it's not optimal to use. This build will promote a gem swap. So I'm going to do the audience, and that means we put concentrated effect in instead of wild shards, so we have optimal single target damage output. And my current gear, I have 165 rarity. My ice shards has about a 9.4 thousand damage per second, but the average damage is 8,000 multiplied by 3, since we're in a position where they scatter shot collateral splash. And my critical strike chance on these is 31.46% plus the crit weakness we apply. So they have a very high crit chance, which is how we make these very comfortable. Gear-wise, however, we're going to start with the Scepter. Just a generic plus level of minions with Spirit. I'm going to compare this build with similar gearing investments that I had on the Storm Mage. You guys can see this, an offensive version versus my defensive focused Oriani. And in here, we're sitting on a Rattling Scepter for the melee minions to sacrifice for Pain Offering. We have plus level of minions and Spirit. If you get cast speed and damage, that's great, or even attributes is actually preferable. Helmet should have plus level of minion skills, +2 preferably. High energy shield, life is good, and then whatever resistances you might need. Amulet is the same as always. If you're able to get level of minions, that will be your main priority. Second priority will be Spirit, and then after that, it's energy shield, attributes, resistances, in whichever order you need them. The shield, I'm a little bit on the fence with. Shield was actually recommended by Helmbreaker. I think that this is fine for damage outputs. I think it's a really good one in general because you can actually get them corrupted. As you can see, the Spirit only rolls up to 50, but I bought one that's rolled above that with a corruption to 59. It's very offensively focused. I think that you can get a corrupted Oaksworn with higher block chance to increase the efficiency of your defensive layer. You can also choose to run a rare shield. Let me show you how a rare shield could look if you decide to do that, which will increase your defenses, but you'll lose the Spirit. And that would look like something like this shield, for example, which has a base block chance of 42%. If I were to equip this shield, I can't because I lack strength, but we have another shield I can show you which has maximum elemental resistances and whatnot. So put this shield on, you can see how my shield block goes to 57% instead of 49%. So it's quite a big difference in what you can do in terms of making the build more comfortable, but it does come at a cost of your Spirit. And as you can see, the jewel I have in here, or the socket, I'm actually running a Jiquani, which is extra life simply because I actually cap my res without anything else, and defenses on this is kind of meh, to be fair. Then we have the boots. High movement speed is key, high energy shield secondary, and then resistances or attributes as needed. The gloves is high energy shield and resistances as needed. Body armor. You can use a Ghost Wraith. It will lower. You won't get Spirit from your chest piece, but it will give you tons and tons and tons of defense. So if you're not having too much currency, a Ghost Wraith would actually be the initial step that you start with till you can get yourself something like this, which will help you with resistances and also give you some Spirit. The belt, again, this is a high-budget version of this build right now. The belt I'm using is an Ingenuity. I would say that using a rare belt is more than fine. Helps you with resistances, especially when you're using something like a Ghost Wraith before you upgrade the build. And I think that Ingenuity will be one of the later upgrades for the build. It's kind of expensive because I would rather prioritize getting Venter's Gambles. It's these rings right here. The reason I would prioritize these rings is because it's going to be a little bit tricky because you have to basically puzzle together your gear pieces based on how much resistances you get from your actual rings. and the ingenuity will scale and increase the efficiency of these rings, which means you rather avoid having negative resistances on both of these rings, unlike the Storm Mage, for example. So in here, you can get some rarity, which is nice. You also get some spirits and some life, but also the resistances, which is then scaled by the ingenuity. As you can see, if I unequip this, I lose my resistances quite drastically. And this is actually one of my better rings here. It has really good life with pretty good spirit, very high rarity, and some half-fast resistances. So it's about like puzzling pieces together. Now you can go for lower rarity or lower life to make this a bit cheaper to buy. They don't cost that much currency. I believe I have one on my lower budget ones I was running before. So this ring here, for example, a little lower rarity. It has pretty decent resistances. That's 3 divines. If you lower the rarity to like 10, 15 rarity, this becomes very cheap for a high budget build, essentially. Before you get something like this, I would actually say that you can use simple rings like this, just some extra HP, tons of resistances, just to get going, and you can play this build to farm currency to upgrade it at a later stage. I believe that covered all the gearing, right? Flasks don't really matter. You should never really care about these things. Mana, I'm just using increased mana recovery. They really don't matter. I think I covered everything. Right, let's show you the boss. This is going to be an audience to the king as juiced up as you can in an offensive version, which means I will do more damage, noticeably more damage than the Storm Mage at the cost of defenses. But my defenses are, as I said before, not being hammered down by having a hybrid chest. I have very high energy shield, making this more than feasible. When it comes to the skills, I will say that the ice bomb is not that useful in many cases. It's nice initial bombing, but I'm going to let my minions do their damage because this costs 400 mana. I can't even cast this twice without waiting for mana or just start spamming my mana flask. I'm running Frostbite Curse, and I'm running Eye of Winter. That's interesting. It says Frostbite, but the curse is Hypothermia. Frostbite is the name of the curse in PoE 1, actually. I didn't even notice that. Frostbite is the name of this curse in PoE 1, but the skill is called Hypothermia. Interesting. Anyways, so basically what I'll be doing is as soon as the boss becomes attackable, I will pop my Pain Offering. I will make sure he's cursed, and I will spam Eye of Winter for the cold exposure and the crit weakness. He will very likely be frozen, and then he's going to die. If he doesn't die immediately, he's going to pop these totems. I'll run and kill them, and this is where the minion builds in general have some problems because I have to move them up the goddamn ramp. But let's check out the fight. So, pop the Pain Offering, get the curse up, and now I'm just spamming this. As you can see here, pop a new offering because that one died. And now he moved up here. Get my minion up here. Come here, minions. Kill the totem. Get down again. Where are you at? That's it. Unlike the Storm Mage, you don't have to be close. Granted, you don't have to be that close. You don't have to be that close to the boss fights. In this phase, you want to find these little globes. Try to run in the direction that they're telling you to go. So I see a light here. I'll go touch the light. It'll tell me where to go. And just try to remember in what direction it's telling you to move. And you will find this portal. That's how you find the exit. It can be a bit scary sometimes because if you fail that, you lose the entire map. As you see, I've not used Frostbomb one bit. Pop the offering, get the curse up, and then start spamming these abilities. Get the new curse up. And that's it. New offering. And that's basically it. Good damage, hardest difficulty version of this. And again, this is an offensive version. And with an offensive version being squishier, I'm sitting on... I hate this game. Where's my goddamn belt? 8,300 energy shield, which is how you stay alive. But it comes at the cost of your block chance. I've been having a lot of success with this build. And I will say this. It's just as comfortable to play this as it is to play the... the Storm Mage. I've been having both builds have been a great success for me. I've done all the endgame content with both of them so far, and I've been just having a blast. Anyways, check out the links in the descriptions below. I will have written guides content coming out for you as soon as Icy Veins is done with their website, and once that's done, I will have all of my build guides will be in written format, consistently updated and available on Icy Veins. But till then, I have the Pastebin link. Just open the Pastebin in the browser, and you'll have all the information there. Don't forget to hit the like button, subscribe for more content, and I will see you in the next one. Till then, stay safe. Keep rocking.